Elias Thorne, an archivist known for his steadfast skepticism, was drawn to Blackwood Manor not by the enormous fee, but by its defiant isolation. Deep within the dark pine forests of New England, the Victorian mansion had stood for nearly a century and a half, covered in the moss of time and sinister tales. Elias's task was to catalog all the Blackwood family's assets and ancient documents before the house was put up for auction. The afternoon he arrived, a dense fog, like a heavy curtain, covered the dirt road leading in. Even in the middle of August, the air was bone-chillingly cold. "I warned you, Mr. Thorne," whispered Mr. Pendergast, the lawyer representing the last heirs, his voice hoarse with unease. "This house has a bad history. I hired 3 people before you, but none lasted more than a week." Elias, a tall man with a meticulously groomed beard, offered a faint smile. "A bad history is usually ghost stories embellished for the press, Mr. Pendergast. I am only interested in ink and parchment." Mr. Pendergast shrank back, glancing at the dark second-floor windows where it was said Countess Eleanor Blackwood had hanged herself after murdering her husband and 3 children on Thanksgiving night in 1923. "It's more than just a story, Mr. Thorne. The scent of her." Elias shrugged. "If there is a ghost, I hope she'll help me sort those heavy manuscripts." They stepped inside. The thick oak door groaned like a lament. Inside, Blackwood Manor was a museum of decay and old wealth. Ceilings soared high, Persian rugs were rolled up in piles like corpses, and the air was thick with the smell of damp wood, dust, and a faint, terrifyingly sweet aroma, as if thousands of roses had been cut and left to rot in a sealed room. Elias's flashlight beam swept across the family portraits. Every pair of eyes, whether belonging to innocent children or stern lords, seemed to stare directly at him. Elias's workspace was designated as the Old Library, a vast, chilly room lined with carved mahogany shelves. After Pendergast hurriedly left with the promise to return in a week, Elias began his work. He organized his notes, voice recorder, and specialized camera. Everything seemed normal until the clock struck midnight. He was examining an old file detailing the debts of Lord Benedict Blackwood, Eleanor's murdered husband, when he heard a sound. Not the whistling of the wind or the rattling of old fixtures. It was the soft rustle of silk, gentle and slow, like a ball gown sweeping across the marble floor outside the hallway. Elias, a rational man, grabbed his flashlight and stepped out. The hallway was pitch black, with only faint moonlight piercing the dirty windows. Nothing. He shook his head and turned back. But as soon as he entered the library, the scent of rotting roses surged, intense and suffocating, as if someone had just spilled a flask of foul, ancient perfume right behind him. At the same moment, a thick manuscript was pushed off the shelf, landing on the floor right at his feet. The manuscript lay open, displaying a yellowed page with shaky handwriting penned in black ink. "It was not me!" Elias felt his blood turn cold. This was no trick. The room had been locked behind him, and this writing, it was too old to be a prank.
The next morning, Elias tried to rationalize the previous night's events with physics and psychology. The manuscript fell due to gravity and poor stacking. The scent was mold in the house's age. The writing was left by a previous curator, but his skepticism was shaken. As he continued cataloging, he found something that should not have existed: a secret room hidden behind a movable bookshelf in Eleanor's main bedroom. The room was tiny, windowless, containing only a small table and a locked oak chest. After forcing the lock with a small crowbar he carried, Elias opened the chest. Inside, there was no treasure, only 2 items: a rusted iron bracelet, rough-looking, carved with a twisting thorn vine. The bracelet emitted a cold, sharply metallic aura. A small, leather-bound diary, undated. The iron bracelet sent shivers down Elias's spine. It carried a feeling of deep malevolence, and he felt an intense headache when he touched it. He pushed it aside and focused on the diary. The diary was not Eleanor Blackwood's. While the handwriting appeared feminine, the content was written in Old Latin, interspersed with obscure local slang. He only managed to translate a few passages, but they were enough to overturn the entire Blackwood Manor case. Translated excerpts, written by a maid named Sarah, 1923. Quote, "He brought the rusted iron back. Lord Benedict said it was to guard us against the fever, but Eleanor cannot touch it. Her lips tremble, her eyes look at me as if she is pleading for something horrible. Every time he forces the band onto her wrist, she loses a part of her soul. She cannot eat, she cannot sleep. She can only scribble meaningless words, repeating over and over that it was not me." Tonight, the children's crying stopped. I heard Lord Benedict pacing, slow and calm. He was singing an old song. Then he screamed, not a scream of terror, but a sound of gruesome satisfaction. When I peered through the keyhole, I saw her, Eleanor, standing there, her white silk dress drenched, not in water. They say she did it. She signed the confession, but her hand holding the pen was trembling too much. As they took her away, she only whispered, "Sarah, hide the rusted iron. He needs it to live. If it is hidden, he won't be able to—" Her voice trailed off. "I don't understand, but I hid the bracelet. Oh God, I hid it. I believe her." Elias felt a cold dread run down his spine. The official historical account was, Eleanor Blackwood, driven mad, murdered her entire family, then committed suicide. But this diary, written by an eyewitness, suggested a different truth. Eleanor was coerced, perhaps under the influence of something called the rusted iron. The real culprit was Lord Benedict Blackwood. Eleanor sacrificed herself to hide a mysterious object, the iron bracelet, that the Lord needed to live. Elias stared at the rough iron bracelet. It looked like a cursed magical artifact, not a piece of jewelry. He decided he must find the original case files to verify. He hurried back to the library, but as he stepped across the threshold, he froze. The room had changed. The books he had meticulously sorted yesterday were scattered across the floor. His desk was overturned, and on the old parchment, right where he had placed the house blueprint, was a new message, written in dried blood, in the same shaky hand as "It was not me." Quote, "You are breaking the curse. Turn back." Immediately, the scent of rotting roses flared up again. This time, it wasn't just a smell. Elias felt an invisible weight pressing down on his chest. He spun around, ready to face whatever was there. Nothing. But the oak chest that held the iron bracelet in the secret room was now sitting in the middle of the library, closed. Elias had left it in the secret room. Who brought it out? Or what? In a moment of acute panic, he heard a voice, not a whisper, but a dry, guttural growl echoing from deep within the walls. "Eleanor cannot tell. Neither can you." A blast of cold air swept through the room, carrying not only dry leaves but also a torn old photograph. The photo fluttered and landed right in front of Elias. It was a portrait of Lord Benedict Blackwood, the murdered husband. But Elias realized the horrifying truth. Lord Benedict in the photo did not look like a dead man. He had a sinister, mocking smile, and clearly visible on his wrist was faintly, but distinctly, the carving of the rusted iron bracelet. Elias understood the terrible reality. The ghost in the manor was not the innocent Eleanor. It was the spirit of Lord Benedict, the true killer, protecting his secret with a curse, trying to drive everyone away from the house and keep the rusted iron buried. He wanted Eleanor to be eternally blamed as the murderer. The eyes in the photo stared back at Elias. Blackwood Manor was not merely haunted, it was a spiritual prison where a dead demon reigned through fear. Elias grasped the chest tightly. He knew he couldn't leave. If this bracelet was the key to keeping Benedict at rest or to freeing Eleanor's soul, he had to find the truth. His confrontation with Blackwood Manor had just begun.
Elias stumbled back, hitting a bookshelf. His entire body trembled, not from fear, but from a cold rage. He was an archivist. His job was to seek the truth, and this truth had been buried under a century of crime and dark magic. "I won't turn back," Elias muttered, his voice echoing in the decaying room. He pulled the chest closer to the table. The heavy oak chest felt like a toy that had just been tossed by an invisible hand. He opened the lock and took out the rusted iron bracelet. The metal was rough, dark, carved with the spiral thorn vine. As he held it, a piercing headache hit him, accompanied by a fleeting image. The distressed face of a young woman, her eyes full of tears. It was Sarah, the maid. Elias quickly placed the bracelet back in the chest and wrapped it tightly in an old silk scarf. He could not let this foul metal influence him. He had to find out what the rusted iron was. Elias returned to the bookshelves. He had organized them by year and topic: economics, geography, poetry, and a small section on theology and occult. He focused on the rarest and oldest books, the ones Lord Benedict might have hidden. After almost 2 hours of searching, in a hidden compartment at the bottom of the Gothic architecture shelf, he found a book with no title, only a glossy black leather cover. It had no author or publisher, just a dried red wax seal, depicting a serpent coiled around an inverted cross. Inside were thick pages, written in Latin and ancient Greek, illustrated with horrific symbols. Elias began to translate, his mind struggling between the rationality of a scientist and the growing terror of a witness. This book was Necrolithos, or Stone of the Dead. It was a manuscript on necromancy and dark magic, apparently passed down secretly through a branch of the Blackwood family. And in the middle of the book, marked by a black silk ribbon, was a chapter titled "The Third Metal Band, the Living Curse and the Rebirth of Death." Elias read, his mouth dry, each word like a stab into his rational belief. ... The third metal, forged from rusted iron, ferrocontaminato, is the most potent soul vessel. It must be tempered with the blood of a murderer and implanted upon an innocent person, possessing a pure soul, anima candida. The bracelet will lock the soul of the innocent into the metal while they are still living, turning them into a soul anchor. When the demonic transitos daimoni, dies, their soul will not travel to the afterlife, but will be dragged back to the bracelet, and through the innocent anchor, they will be granted eternal life in death, becoming the immortal lord of the house that witnessed the death. To break this rebirth, the bracelet must be taken to the place it was forged and must be purified by the very fire and the vital serum of the innocent, the one used as sacrifice. Elias collapsed onto the cold floor. This explained everything. Lord Benedict Blackwood was not just a murderer. He was a demonic transitional who had used Eleanor and their children in a grotesque ritual. Benedict had murdered his children, using their blood to forge the rusted iron bracelet. Then he forced Eleanor to wear the band.
She was the anima candida, the pure soul. The bracelet had sucked her life force, weakening her and stripping her of her will before Benedict committed suicide, or staged it as such, to become the immortal lord of the manor, anchored by Eleanor's imprisoned soul. Eleanor did not kill herself. She was murdered. And after death, her soul never passed on. She remained there, bound to the bracelet to fuel the one who killed her, Benedict. The scent of rotting roses Pendergrast mentioned was not Eleanor's scent. It was the smell of spiritual decay, the smell of Eleanor's soul rotting within the bracelet, desperately trying to send one final message: "It was not me." Elias looked at Benedict's photograph. That mocking smile now carried an entirely different meaning. The satisfaction of a demon who had triumphed even over death. "You exploited her even in death, you bastard," Elias gritted out. At that very moment, the flashlight began to flicker wildly. The thick silence of the manor was broken by a chilling sound, the laughter of children, not happy laughter, but a cold, echoing giggle reverberating from the main staircase, as if three invisible children were playing hide-and-seek. "Father found you?" Benedict Blackwood's deep, repulsive voice echoed from the hallway. Elias clutched the necrolithos. The room became so cold that frost began to form on the corners of the books. His headache intensified violently, as if a hammer was pounding his skull. Elias felt the cold aura advancing into the library. He could see nothing, but he knew Benedict was there, a dark entity staring at him. The dry, guttural growl sounded again, this time right next to his ear, raising the hair on his neck. "You read my book. You know too much. You will pay by dying like them, by your own hand." Simultaneously, Elias felt a strong, invisible force push the rusted iron bracelet out of the chest. The bracelet flew into the air, spinning, and lunged straight toward Elias's wrist. He screamed. The bracelet had not yet touched his skin, but it emitted a cold heat, an aura of malevolence aimed at bending his will. Elias used all his strength, backing away and trying to smash the bracelet against the table edge. But the bracelet remained suspended, as if held by an invisible thread. "No, I will not be your next anchor," yelled Elias. He suddenly remembered. The bracelet was hidden in an oak chest. Oak, wood, books. In a desperate act, Elias grabbed the oak chest, using every bit of his remaining strength to throw it toward the window. The old stained glass window shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces. And as the chest flew out the window, the suspended rusted iron bracelet suddenly stopped. It fell to the wooden floor with a horrifying clang, but it was no longer floating. Elias grasped for breath. Could the entity not control the object if it was outside his direct sphere of influence? Or did breaking the window momentarily weaken his focus? From outside, the children's giggles ceased, replaced by a wild, furious roar echoing from the deep heart of the manor. Benedict had been thwarted. Elias lay motionless on the cold floor, the necrolithos in his hand. He looked out the broken window, where a gust of cold, damp mist blew in. He knew the truth. He possessed the cursed object. But to free Eleanor and destroy Benedict, he had to follow the inscription in the necrolithos, find the place where the bracelet was forged, and purify it with the vital serum of the innocent, the one used as sacrifice. And he realized in all Blackwood Manor, perhaps only one place ancient and grotesque enough existed: the Secret Forge Crypt, the birthplace of the Blackwood curse.
He looked down at the rough iron bracelet lying on the floor. His next mission was to find the serum, the remaining evidence of Eleanor and the children, and confront Benedict in his lair.
Elias wasted no minute. He knew Benedict Blackwood was recovering from the setback. His fury resonated through the walls, not as sound, but as vibrations in the air, as if the manor's very architecture was shaking with rage. He quickly wrapped the rusted iron bracelet in the old silk scarf and carefully placed it in a small steel box, an item he used for sensitive document preservation. He believed that metal, modern steel, could create a temporary barrier against Benedict's power, or at least limit his direct contact with it. He tightened his boots, checked his flashlight, and tucked a rescue flare gun, a necessity when exploring old ruins, into his pocket. The necrolithos lay open on the desk. Under the section, "The Third Metal Band," was a crude drawing of a house, with an X marked in the southeast corner, deep beneath the foundation. The southeast section of the manor was where the kitchen and wine cellar were located. It was the only area where the original, primitive Gothic architecture remained intact, covered by Victorian plaster. Elias descended the service stairs, where the wood was rotten and groaned beneath every step. The smell of rotting roses and damp wood gave way to another scent, that of raw earth, sulfur, and cold metal, the smell of an abandoned forge. The Blackwood wine cellar was a maze of dusty, spiderweb covered old bottles. Elias navigated the narrow aisles. He noticed the temperature dropped unnaturally, not the cold of winter, but a sterile cold, as if life had been sucked out of the air. He reached the southeast corner, where old oak barrels were stacked high near the ceiling. According to the necrolithos map, the entrance should be here. He pushed a heavy oak barrel aside. Behind it was not a stone wall, but a patch of modern cement brickwork. Benedict tried to hide it, Elias muttered. The bricks were of the type used in the 1920s, around the time of the massacre. He used the crowbar to pry apart the mortar. The heavy work made him sweat. Benedict, the spirit bound to the manor, could not directly attack him unless he was weak or compromised by the bracelet, but he could influence the environment. As he pried out the last brick, an ancient stone wall appeared, and from within, a blast of frigid air rose, carrying the sound of whispering, like thousands of unseen voices wailing. The whispering was not clear speech, but a confluence of pain and fear. Were these the souls of the innocent bound by the curse? Eleanor or the children? The hidden door revealed itself, made of heavy, crude iron, bolted shut with a rusted latch. No key was needed. Elias used the crowbar to force the latch open. The horrifying sound of metal scraping echoed throughout the cellar. The door swung open, revealing a spiral staircase of gray, slick, damp stone descending deep into the earth. Final step, Elias told himself. He began his descent. Each step was a commitment to another space. As he went deeper, the whispers became clearer, interspersed with small, weak sobs. "Mother, it's so cold. Father, don't hurt Mother." Elias paused. These were the voices of the Blackwood children. They were not merely murdered. Their souls had been stripped and bound to this place. Elias felt Eleanor's despair and his own escalating fury multiply. He reached the bottom of the staircase. It was a vast chamber, nothing but rough stone and a grotesque structure at the center. The Secret Forge Crypt was not a metal forge. It was an altar. At the room's center lay a block of black granite carved with arcane symbols. On the surface of the block,
he saw a large burn mark shaped like the spiral thorn vine, where the rusted iron bracelet had been forged with the ritual blood. Right next to the altar was a small ancient hearth made of clay brick, but inside it, a faint red glow still pulsed, as if the flame had been maintained for 99 years. This was the purifying fire the necrolithos had mentioned. And then Elias saw the remaining item. Resting on a side table, next to the altar, was an object that looked like a small, exquisite silver jewelry box. The silver box opened. Inside, not a hideous liquid, but 3 tiny dry blonde hair locks, and a patch of white silk stained with dark brown dried blood. The silk patch was the exact material as the dress Eleanor wore on the night of the massacre. This was the vital serum of the innocent, the hair of the 3 children and the blood of Eleanor, the last physical evidence of their innocence. Benedict had kept them here to ensure his ritual was eternal. Elias reached out with a trembling hand, gently taking the hairlocks and silk patch. As he touched them, the wailing in the air abruptly stopped. Instead, he heard a light, soft sigh, like a breeze passing through, from a distant place. "Thank you." Eleanor's voice, weak but full of gratitude. But the silence only lasted for a moment. Benedict Blackwood realized Elias had found what he was protecting. Suddenly, the iron door above slammed shut with a noise so loud Elias was nearly deafened. His flashlight began to flicker wildly and then died, leaving the crypt in complete darkness save for the faint red glow of the hearth. From a dark corner, laughter erupted. This time, it was not a growl, but the deep, cultured, yet utterly insane voice of a gentleman. "Mr. Thorne, it is admirable that you made it this far. You found my old playthings, but you cannot take them away. You cannot destroy the eternal life I purchased with the sacrifice of my family." Elias repeatedly clicked the flashlight switch, but for no avail. He leaned against the wall, feeling the bone-deep cold of Benedict's presence. "You are not alive, Benedict," Elias said, his voice firm, though his heart hammered fiercely. "You are a prison bound to this metal. You are no lord." "Silence!" Benedict's voice boomed, with an invisible force, slamming Elias into the stone wall. He felt as if thousands of needles were pricking his skin. "You need Eleanor. She is your anchor. When I free her, you will be wiped out," Elias yelled, trying to challenge him. "She is mine. The children are mine. And you, Elias Thorne, your rational, iron soul will be the next anchor. The rusted iron bracelet awaits its new owner." Elias felt the rusted iron bracelet in his small steel box begin to vibrate violently. He knew he was out of time. He had to act. He had the rusted iron, the serum, and the purifying fire waiting in the hearth. Now was the time to confront Lord Blackwood with his own ritual.
Elias Thorne struggled up the stairs. His feet were heavy, not from physical exhaustion, but from the weight of what he had endured. He had transitioned from a skeptical historical archivist to a cleaner of ancient curses. He knew his rationality was utterly broken, replaced by a cold acceptance of the dark forces that still existed. He spent the rest of the day gathering all the evidence. He found Sarah's diary, the brave maid, and the necrolithos, the terrifying black magic book. He photographed the scorched granite altar in the forge crypt and the dried bloodstain on the silk before it turned to ash. Everything was carefully packed. The most noticeable thing was the change in Blackwood Manor. Silence had replaced the wailing, and sunlight had conquered the gloom. There was no more scent of rotting roses,
no more cold giggling. The house was now merely an empty shell, a decaying old structure. The curse was lifted. That night, Elias fell asleep on the old sofa in the library, no longer feeling watched or threatened. He slept soundly, for the first time after many sleepless, haunted nights. The next morning, right on schedule, Mr. Pendergast's car rolled onto the fog-covered dirt road. Mr. Thorne. Mr. Pendergast sighed with relief upon seeing Elias alive and awake. I was worried you would leave, like the others. My task is complete, Elias said, his voice steady, but the work file needs revision. They sat in the living room. Elias opened his suitcase, placing the copy of Sarah's diary, the translated excerpts from the Necrolithos, and the photos of the altar and the Forge Crypt, and the dried bloodstain on the silk before it turned to ash. Everything was carefully packed. The old lawyer trembled as he read the documents. His face turned pale as Elias recounted the details of the rusted iron bracelet, Eleanor's sacrifice, and the existence of Benedict Blackwood as a demonic spirit. This is impossible, Mr. Pendergast stammered. What proof? It's all ancient texts and myths. The proof is that this manor is no longer haunted, and I have freed the souls of Eleanor and her children. The truth is that Lord Benedict Blackwood murdered his wife and children in a heretical ritual to gain hideous immortality, and he succeeded for nearly 100 years. Elias handed Mr. Pendergast the completed official archival file, in which he had reclassified Eleanor Blackwood from a deranged murderer to a victim and martyr. My job is done. This manor can be auctioned, but with a new explanation to the public. Elias's voice carried the certainty of one who had seen the truth. It took Mr. Pendergast a few minutes to regain his composure. I will have to present this to the court in the heirs, but I believe you, Mr. Thorne. I smelled those rotting roses, and I haven't been able to sleep soundly for the past week. A few weeks later, the story of Blackwood Manor spread across tabloids and esoteric history journals. The truth was distorted and exaggerated, but the core remained the same. Countess Eleanor was innocent, and her deceased husband was a demonic worshipper. Elias returned to his normal life, but he was no longer the same. He was still an archivist, but he had learned that history is written not only in ink, but also in blood and magic. One evening, as he was reorganizing his personal belongings, his small steel box dropped. The copper coin, the only remaining keepsake of the battle in the Forge Crypt, rolled onto the floor. He picked it up. The coin was still frigid and unnatural cold. He examined it closely under the light. It was not an ancient Roman coin. It bore the image of a human head, but instead of wearing a laurel wreath, it wore a bracelet of twisted thorn vines, the image of the rusted iron bracelet. And around the coin's edge, there was a tiny Latin inscription. Elias had not noticed it in the dark crypt. He translated the inscription. Solus redeo, iterum vivo, semper solus. I return alone, I live again, forever alone. Elias felt a cold shiver run down his spine. This coin was not the currency of the underworld meant to punish Benedict. It was his key. The Necrolithos had stated, "The one who forged the third metal must pay an eternal price, bound to the currency of the underworld." Benedict was not bound. He had purchased freedom. The rusted iron bracelet had melted, but that was Eleanor's release. For Benedict, he exchanged his imprisoned immortality in the manor for a new form of existence, a solitary freedom, bound to a small object, a coin, allowing him to return anywhere, seeking a new anchor, a new anima condita. Elias stared at the coin in his palm. Benedict Blackwood had not been destroyed. He had been released, becoming a mobile curse, a wandering demon.
The peace Elias felt had vanished. He had not ended the story. He had merely opened a new, far more dangerous chapter. Benedict had escaped his prison and was now somewhere out there. Elias placed the coin in a drawer and locked it. He knew that one day he would have to face Lord Blackwood again. The work of an archivist of the truth never ends.